Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Artsbeat TV and Radio here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, 89.5 FM WSKB, and our media partners at Southwick Community Television and Agawam Media. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and a couple of weeks ago we ran an interview with Hugh Panaro, the Broadway star who made history in Phantom of the Opera because he was coming to the Talcott Mountain Music Festival with the Hartford Symphony Orchestra. And we've just learned that Hugh Panaro is coming back to the area on August 21st to do a cabaret performance of Broadway music at Barrington Stage Company in Pittsfield. So we thought that we would share this interview with you once again. Again, Hugh Panaro will be at Barrington Stage Company August 21st. And for tickets and information for that, you can go to barringtonstageco.org. Yeah.
My next guest is Hugh Panaro, who has a Broadway resume that just goes on and on and on. And last year at this time, he came to Springfield, Massachusetts to perform music of Stephen Sondheim in a musician of the Springfield Symphony Orchestra summer concert about Sondheim at Symphony Hall, where I got a chance to work with him, and I became a fanboy immediately. But his career goes back to the musicals Les Mis, Phantom of the Opera, Showboat, Sideshow, and many, many more. And he will be headlining the Hartford Symphony Orchestra's Talcott Mountain Music Festival on July 14th on a program called Bravo Broadway, in which he co-stars with Christiane Knoll, who those of you that go to Theater Works in Hartford will know because she starred in Next to Normal and Fun Home at Theater Works. And Hugh, it's great to have you on this program.
It's great to be here. I hope you can hear me. I'm low tech.
I can hear you very well. And
great.
It looks like it's real nice and sunny wherever you are compared to here.
Oh, it's not too bad. No, it's beautiful out.
Yeah. So what are some of the songs that you'll be doing when you do the Bravo Broadway at Talcott Mountain?
Well, I think people that come expecting certain things will not be disappointed. You're going to get some of our, what I call Christiane Knoll's and Hugh Panaro's greatest hits. Music of the Night, maybe some other Phantom. I won't give everything away. You mentioned Les Mis, probably a Bring 'Em Home might be in there. You'll get some, I'm pretty sure Christiane's going to give you some Dear Evan Hansen. And then we've got some kind of great duets. And I personally love singing with Christiane. So it's when you get to sing with your friends, it makes it a whole different experience.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if the two of you had worked together before.
Never in a show, but we have done concerts all over. We've been to Prague together. We've been to Hong Kong together, Oklahoma, you name it. Everywhere we've kind of been together. And we actually did a really, unfortunately, we're not doing anything from Bridges of Madison County. However, we did a concert version of Bridges of Madison County with Jason Robert Brown conducting in Iowa. And that was probably one of my favorite things that Christiane and I have ever gotten to do together. And it was a live radio broadcast, and my mom got to listen in Philadelphia, so it was great.
That's fabulous. You've done most of your career has been on the Broadway stage, either in New York or on national tour or in London, as opposed to film or television. And concertizing seems to be somewhat new to you over maybe the last 10 or 15 years. What got you interested in theater in the first place?
Well, I'm going to probably bore you and a lot of people, but this is the true story, and I've told it before. I was going to be a veterinarian. I love animals to this day more than anything on the planet. And when I was 12 years old, we were watching the Today Show before school, and a segment from a new musical came on called Annie. And it starred a little girl named Andrea McCardle from my neighborhood in Philadelphia. And my mom literally said, oh, we should get tickets and, support the local girl. And we piled in the station wagon and we drove to New York City to the Alvin Theater, which is now, of course, the Neil Simon Theater. And as the story goes, the lights went down and the overture began. And by the end of Act One, I didn't want to be a veterinarian anymore. I wanted to do that.
And I mean, your career, you've gone from one great show to another. And one thing I wanted to ask you, you spent a long time doing Phantom.
Yeah.
Did you ever think Phantom would run on Broadway as long as it did?
You know what, Mark? I never really thought about it too much, but it is what is weird now is that it's not there anymore. And I began my Phantom family life in 1991, I believe, playing Raoul. And I left. I loved playing Raoul. I left to do a new show called The Red Shoes, which was Julie Stein's last musical, and it was a terrible flop. We opened Thursday, got our notice Friday, and closed Sunday. But then after doing Showboat for Hal Prince in London, he called me up and he said, "You know what? I think you're old enough," and I love this word. He said, "I think you have the gravitas to play the Phantom now." So that was 1999, and that was my first time playing the Phantom. And I left again to do a show called Martin Guerre, written by the same composers of Les Miserables and Saigon. And unfortunately, that never made it to New York either. So I came back to Phantom, The Gift That Keeps on Giving, and was there for another run as the Phantom. Left again to do Elton John's show, Lestat. And that was not quite as bad as the Red Shoes, but I think it ran 35 performances. And luckily, they asked me back to Phantom again. So I feel like I'm always going home, and this is a true story. Every time I would return to the Majestic Theater, there would be a handwritten note on my dressing room mirror, and it said, "Welcome home, love, Hal." And it was like my home. And so now to know that the show is gone and Mr. Prince is no longer with us, it is kind of, it's an end of an era.
It definitely is. And I talked to another colleague of yours not that long ago, Lisa Vroman, who performed
Oh,
in Springfield. And Lisa and I go back to we were both at Miami Opera at the same time, and she said that it was, I guess she went for the closing performance. Or for some of the things, and she said,
no,
"Wow,
we partied at Sardi's.
yeah." She said it was a major. She didn't realize what a major chapter in her professional and personal life doing Phantom was.
Yeah. And I'm going to toot her horn. I've known Lisa. We met doing a little night music in Philadelphia. I was 21 years old, and she was one of the most magnificent voices I had ever heard. And she's going to get mad at me when I tell you this, but she was smoking at the time. And she would smoke a cigarette and go out on stage and sing a high E, like falling off a log. And I just marveled at her technique. And also, again, she's like a pal. Like we would have fun together. So when we got to do Phantom together, it was we've had a couple reunions. So it was obviously when you saw us together doing the Sondheim, that was a dream come true with Ron Raines.
Oh, that was such a great show. I've worked on concerts for years. I mean, in addition to doing broadcasting, I do a lot of PR for some of the local arts things. I think that was the most fun show that I've worked on probably in my career.
I had a blast, and I don't know if you knew this, but we had done a similar we were supposed to do a similar version, I believe, I could be wrong, with Hartford Symphony years ago. And about a week before the concert, I got a strep throat infection and was completely hoarse. And I went to my voice doctor and I got a shot of steroids, and he scoped me and he drained my sinuses. And I was doing everything humanly possible to do this concert because it was with Lisa and Ron and Flo. And I think about 2 days before the actual concert, I went to him and he scoped my vocal cords and said, "Hugh, if you sing, you could hemorrhage a vocal cord, and sometimes no one likes to do it, but sometimes you actually have to cancel. And that was actually the first time I ever had to cancel a concert. And it was one of the most devastating moments of my life that I didn't get to sing with Lisa again. And so when we got to do this concert, it was kind of like a do-over for us. So it was really quite joyful.
And for me, it was what also made it special was that Florence Lacey had done Hello Dolly way back with Houston Grand Opera, and I was working. That's there when that show launched in Houston on its way to New York, and I never realized until much later that Flo and her husband lived basically a couple of towns away from me, and to get to work with the two of them and you and Lisa was just, I mean, if I never do another concert, it was one of my happiest concerts.
Well, I think I might have told you this when we were working together. When Tim Stella was my associate conductor at Phantom, and he said, "Oh, can I bring my wife backstage after the show tonight?" I said, "Oh my gosh, I'd love to meet her." He said, "Yeah, I'll bring Flo back." And I didn't think it. And then Florence Lacey walked in, and I just about had a conniption because talk about fanboy. I lost my mind. I had followed her career. I knew every word of the grand tour, and I started singing it for her. And I think she was like ready to call security because no, really, I was such a fan. And Tim and Flo have become such dear, dear, dear friends. So it's and she's just the best human being on the planet.
Oh,
So
she definitely.
I don't think she needs to call security anymore.
No, I don't think so. We're going to take a quick break to acknowledge our underwriters, but before we do, Hugh Panaro and Christiane Knoll are performing at Talcott Mountain Music Festival with the Hartford Symphony Orchestra on July 14th. And then on July 21st, the Hartford Symphony will be doing an Eagles tribute. July 28th, they'll be doing a salute to the pop band Earth, Wind, and Fire. And you can get information on these concerts. They're rain or shine. They're at Talcott Mountain in Simsbury, Connecticut, just down the road. And tickets are available at hartfordsymphony.org. We're chatting with Hugh Panaro from Broadway, who's doing Bravo Broadway with Christiane Knoll. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach, and we'll return after these announcements.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
Underwriting for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Westfield, serving the youth of the Whip City and surrounding communities since 1969. For more information on the Great Futures Club for ages 3 to 5, happening weekdays, and the Club Teen Center for ages 11 and older, weekdays from 6:30 till 8 p.m., go online at bcgwestfield.org or visit the club at 28 West Silver Street. The Boys and Girls Club of Greater Westfield. Great futures start here.
This is Ken Stomsky from Ken's Den on WCPC 15 and 89.5 FM, Tuesdays, 8 to 10.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're chatting with Hugh Panaro, who will be starring in Bravo Broadway on the 14th of July at Talcott Mountain with Christiane Knoll. They'll be singing their greatest Broadway hits. You've done a lot of Sondheim over the years, and you did a Sondheim concert in Springfield last summer. He's gone now, but are there any particular musicals that you've done that are Sondheim that are your most memorable?
Yeah, Sweeney Todd is probably, I always say it's part of my DNA. After my Annie extravaganza to New York, the next trip we took was to see Peter Pan and Sweeney Todd in one weekend. And it was kind of a strange strange pair, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
my mother specifically said that you must see Angela Lansbury live on a stage. Seeing her on TV is great. Seeing her in the movies, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, I loved her in that. She said, but to see this woman on stage is pure magic. And she was not lying. It was life-changing to see Angela Lansbury and Len Cariou. And it was just, of course, back then I bought the cast album and I knew every word. And got to play Anthony at the Kennedy Center at the summer of Sondheim in 2002, and I got to play Anthony, and that was a dream come true. Even though I was secretly coveting the role of Tobias at that time, and then I got to grow up and play Sweeney at the Barrow Street Theater opposite my dear friend Carolee Carmelo. So Sweeney is definitely in my heart and in my soul. The other one, well, there's so many I made when I was younger. Like I said, when I met Lisa Roman, I was 21 playing Henrik in A Little Night Music. And I would go from production to production when I was a youngster playing Henrik because I loved that part. And it was such a great role, again, when you're 21. Now I'm ready to do Frederick. I'm ready to do that. So hire me, somebody. But the thing that honestly really does stick out, I did a beautiful production of Sunday in the Park with George at the Fifth Avenue Theater in Seattle. And it was Sam Buntrick's production that he had just done in New York. I don't know if you saw it, with the green screens. And it was very high tech combined with that magnificent music. And that was a life moment that I will never forget. For many reasons, artistically, if you are an artist, that show, I think, speaks to us in a way that no other show does. That said, after about the first couple weeks of doing the show, and when all the Sondheim folks came right away to see Sunday in the Park. And then as more of the subscription audiences began, it was interesting because the vibe changed. And I don't think it is something that particularly resonated with some audiences if you're not a Sondheim fan, or if you don't understand the dilemma of being an artist and what it takes to make art. And, there are a few nights I remember thinking, gosh, I think they came to see Cats and they're a little disappointed, and that they actually have to really concentrate and focus and think. No disrespect to Cats. Don't anybody write to me.
Yeah. Did you over the years? Did you ever get to work with Sondheim directly and work with him?
I did.
How fortunate you are for that.
So this is a true story. I actually tell this when I do my solo show at 54 Debut, and so the first day of rehearsal at the Kennedy Center, we were told in advance to make sure you know your music. You don't have to be off book, but you need to know it, because the first day we are going to sing through the entire show, sitting on folding chairs, just with a piano. And so we all were prepared, and we sat in our folding chairs with our scores and scripts on our laps. And at the last minute, in walks Stephen Sondheim. And we all, had oh my God. And we sang through Act 1, and it went pretty darn well. And the stage manager said, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 10-minute break and resume with Act 2. And I'm not making this up, Mark. Mr. Sondheim waved to me and went like this, like, come here. So I trotted over to Mr. Sondheim. I said, hello, Mr. Sondheim, how are you? He goes, I'm good, Hugh, how are you? I said, I'm great. I'm really excited to be here. And I love the show so much. He said, yeah, you know every word of my score, don't you? I said, I do. He said, yeah, you're mouthing everybody's lyrics. You might want to stop that. I stopped. But that was the first time, that was my first interaction with him. And what I also loved, I I grew up playing the church organ at our church, Catholic church. So, I'm very accustomed to guilt. And I knew every word perfect and every note perfect. And the next thing I know, he was calling me over again. He said, Hugh, I appreciate your singing all the notes I wrote. He said, but, you don't have to sing everything. If you speak, you don't have a gate. This is in the song Kiss Me, when Anthony is singing to Joanna and she says, I think I hear the gate. And he says, you don't have a gate. And I was singing it. You don't have a gate, exactly as written. And he said, if you just say it, you'll get a big laugh. So I stopped singing it and I started just saying it. And he was right. I got a big laugh. So, that, I don't know. It was so cool to have like the composer himself not be precious about every note and really be dramatically driven and just say, you're going to get a laugh if you do it this way.
You've been very lucky in your career to work with a lot of the best of Broadway composers: Andrew Lloyd Webber, Julie Stein.
Julie was one of my favorites.
Even though the Red Shoes only lasted a weekend, I mean, and all of that, I've actually heard the recording of it. It's not as bad as I anticipated it would be. And there is a ballet version of it now that one of the ballet companies in London does, but it's not, they don't use Julie Stein's music. It's a wonderful story.
Interesting. Lar Lubavitch did the choreography for the Broadway production, and I will tell you, it was magnificent, as were all the dancers. I'm, when you grow up as a singer, the grass is always greener. I would just marvel at all of the magnificent dancers in the cast, and I would try to hang out with them and emulate them, but I could, barely walk and chew gum. So
yeah. At this point in your career, do you go and do runs of shows, or do you prefer to concertize, or do you try to mix it up?
I love both. If someone came to me now and said, hey, do you want to do 8 shows a week? I would be absolutely. I've had, time off from Sweeney. That was hard doing 8 shows of Sweeney a week, I won't lie. But it's interesting. I love both. I love concerts because there's no fourth wall. So you really get to relate to the audience in a different way. So I'm open to both. There aren't, the older one gets, there's not maybe as many opportunities to do a Broadway show as when you're in your 20s and just, fresh off the boat. And so I'm very grateful to be singing all these concerts all over the world. And again, getting to work with my friends, because that is a whole other layer of joy that, when Christiane and I do a gig, we have an unspoken dialogue. We don't have to talk about anything. We breathe together. We follow each other's lips. We shape our vowels together. Silly things. It's like, what are you wearing for Act 1? I'll make sure my shirt matches. Stuff like that. So I don't know that I can pick between Broadway and concerts, but I love both.
But you also do your own show, like at Studio 54, something like that. A solo type of thing. Do you have the opportunity to do new works, or do you do Hugh Panaro's greatest hits when you go out on the road?
A little bit of both. I try to make my solo show extremely personal. I think audiences are really smart. I don't think sometimes people give them credit for how smart they are. And I think they can spot, pardon me, BS a mile away. So I try to keep it very real and tell a lot of stories, why I do what I do and what has shaped my life. And but the last time when I did Studio 54, I actually did a new work by Joseph Thalken, who was my MD, but he's also a magnificent composer. And we introduced a never heard before Song of Joseph's. That is actually one of my favorites. So it's called You Have Never Failed Me. And we're actually doing shameless promotion. We're actually doing a live CD based on that evening. So you will be able to hear that new song by Joseph Thalken.
Do you have a website and social media so people can follow you?
The best thing to do is my Instagram, because I'm pretty bad at that stuff, but I have somebody that's helping me out now with it. And it's my Instagram is Real Hugh Panaro. So REAL and then my name, HUGHPANARO, Real Hugh Panaro, as opposed to fake Hugh Panaro.
There can't be a fake Hugh Panaro. There's only one. when you're not performing or rehearsing, what do you do to get away from it all? I mean, can you shut off your theater world and have another life, or is it all interspersed as one?
I'm a little bit like a minor bird. I never stop singing. I love to sing. I sing in the shower. I sing around the house. I love to go hiking. I love to be outside. I love planting. I love plants and animals. So, I mean, literally, I'm not making this up, Mark. When I'm learning a new song, I go out to my garden and I take my phone and a recording and my sheet music, and I'm literally outside in the garden singing to the chipmunks and the squirrels and the birds and learning my words. I'm learning something from Dear Evan Hansen right now, and the chipmunks are probably sick of hearing "You Will Be Found." But I love music. It's in my DNA, but there's so many other things that I really love. And, during COVID, as artists, things were really bleak. So I'm kind of a nerd, and I grew Venus flytraps, carnivorous plants in my basement under grow lights. And now I'm such a nerd. I have 30 Venus flytraps outside right now catching flies, and it was my inner 12-year-old was very happy doing that.
And do you bring them indoors in the winter?
You have to this is really, I'm going to be tedious. Yeah, you have to bring them indoors in the winter because they need a dormancy period, and they die back to a rhizome, and then you take them out once it's above freezing, take them outside again, and they magically come to life, and they're like, feed me.
It's like a little shop of horrors. You got tons of them ready to go.
Yeah.
So I know that you just did, by the time this airs, you just did a show at Branford, Connecticut, and you're doing Talcott Mountain. What's on your agenda the next month or two after that, if people can't get to Talcott Mountain?
I'm actually, well, this is, again, I think I'm not sure when we air it, but I'm doing a Father's Day concert in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And then I'm doing another solo concert with Tim Stella in Wethersfield, Connecticut. And then I think then it's Christiane and I. And then the next one after that, I believe, is the Grant Park Music Festival in Chicago, which is going to be so much fun. I've only been to Chicago a few times. Like, I didn't ever tour there, so I haven't spent a lot of time there. So I'm really kind of looking forward to that. And that's actually with my friend Scarlett Strallen and Lakeisha Jones. And I don't know if you know those guys. They're awesome.
Scarlett Strallen did the Pirates of Penzance here at Barrington Stage a couple of years ago. She's fabulous.
Did she do it was her husband Bryce Pinkham as well?
I don't know. He wasn't in it as far as I remember.
They're both mega talented, and I love them both, and their children. They're perfect, gorgeous children. I love. They're just the greatest family.
Well,
Hugh Jones is a powerhouse.
Yeah. We are out of time, but it's been such a pleasure to chat with you this morning. Folks, you can catch Hugh Panaro with Christiane Knoll July 14th at Talcott Mountain Music Festival with the Hartford Symphony. Tickets at hartfordsymphony.org. Hugh, thanks for being here. It's been great to chat.
Back at you. Thank you, Mark, very, very much.
Okay, we're going to leave you today with one of Hugh's recordings. It's from Sideshow, which is one of my favorite musicals. It's called 1+1. Peter Coles was our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach. We'll see you next week with another Artsbeat.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Bay State Noble Hospital, a brand new name for a Westfield institution which is improving the health of our community every day with quality and compassion. Noble Hospital and Bay State Health. Better together.
Join us every Thursday morning
from 6 until at least 7:30.
Check out the Bobby G and Company Show
right here on WSKB 89.5
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. If you've missed a part of today's program, or you want to watch it again or share it with your friends, it's archived on YouTube under WSKB Community Radio. Our guest for this half hour is Daniel Elihu Kramer, who is the chair of the theater program at Smith College. For many years was the artistic director at Chester Theater, and he left that position at the end of last season to assume this job at Smith, but he's returning to Chester to direct the final production of the season. So Daniel, how are you spending your summer when you're not at Chester?
Well, it is definitely different. Obviously, one of the wonderful things I'll be doing is directing Circle Mirror Transformation at Chester, but you see me right now in the guest room of my mother's house in Oregon. So one of the things I'm getting to do with my summer is that. I've also got to spend a little more time with my wife. I've been out to a film festival. I've been down to New York more to see theater. But also we have another new faculty member joining us at Smith, a wonderful playwright. Been busy with that. And a friend ran into me somewhere who didn't know I had stepped down after last season at Chester, and said, first off, I never see you anywhere in the summer. Who let you out? And secondly, you're not pale the way you normally are. So I guess I've been getting outside, Mark.
That's really good. And you're skipping all the rain right now that we're having here in the Valley. It seems that it rains every day.
I gather, and that's okay with me.
So tell me a little bit about Circle Mirror Transformation. I know that you've assembled a group of actors that you've worked with before in many cases, and it's a play by an Amherst playwright, Annie Baker, or she was from Amherst at one point. But give us a little rundown on what the play is about and whether you chose it or Chester chose it and how it came to be.
Great, absolutely. So Circle Mirror Transformation is really one of the most wonderful, beautiful plays I know, honestly. It follows a group of 5 people in a smallish town in Vermont, a made-up town called Shirley, Vermont, where Annie Baker has set 3 different plays, and the other 2 have both been produced at Chester previously. Body Awareness a bunch of years ago, and then a few years back, her play, The Aliens, which I directed there, which was also featured in a New Yorker article, that production and our work on it. But it follows these 5 people in Shirley, Vermont, who are all participating in a community creative drama class at the local community center for adults. And what it wonderfully does is over the 6 weeks that we see them taking this class, it also has these sort of great, sneaky, lovely, funny ways that it is telling us the story of what's going on and changing in those characters' lives over the course of those 6 weeks. So a really fun play because it incorporates this theater class itself and all the sort of goofy exercises and things that they're doing in it. And then, you know, as the title says, Circle Mirror Transformation, what sneaks up on you is the way that they're actually transforming over the course of those 6 weeks.
And you've worked with most of the actors before. Have you talked with them? Are you into production yet? Have you talked with them, or do you have a very brief rehearsal period to go?
Yeah, so we're just getting ready to start rehearsals. I think actually by the time we're so close that by the time this airs, we probably will be in rehearsals. And it's an amazing cast. So I'm going to take a moment and talk about them. You also asked me who chose this play. When I was artistic director, I almost chose it once or twice. And Tara Franklin, who along with her husband, James Barry, they're now the co-artistic directors at Chester, really loved it too. And so when they programmed their first season, I know they wanted to focus, especially at the bookends of the season, on sort of a celebration of theater itself, which this play totally is. The cast is amazing. So there are a lot of folks who will be familiar to Chester theater goers and to Berkshire's area theater goers. The one cast member I haven't gotten to work with previously, I'm very excited to work with, and that's Corinna May, whom a lot of folks will know from a bunch of really wonderful work that she's done. In fact, at last year's Berkshire Theater Awards, she won 2 awards, one for Best Actress and one for solo performance. So pretty remarkable actor whom I'm thrilled to get to work with. And then a couple of folks whom Chester audiences will know. Tara Franklin, who I just mentioned, is in it. Joel Ripka, who has done a number of productions at Chester, though not since before the pandemic. He was in our production of Every Brilliant Thing, and also was in that production of The Aliens that I talked about. Will be back up. The 2 other folks I'm getting to work with are really exciting for me for different reasons. One of the characters in the play is a high school girl named Lauren, and a wonderful young actress who was a student of mine at Smith and recently graduated will be doing her first fully professional production. So that's a wonderful actress named Hero Marguerite who will be in that role. And then there was one role we were struggling a little bit with casting, and I had this idea. I was like, I'm going to reach out to somebody and just try. And I have gotten lucky enough that an old Yale drama classmate of mine, Alex Draper, is going to come down and play that role. So it is a cast I'm so excited to get into the room with, and I know it's going to be a joy in there.
Have you met Annie Baker before?
We've interacted a little bit. As you said, she grew up in Amherst, and this made-up town of Shirley, Vermont has more than a little bit of Amherst in it, as a matter of fact. I actually was in Amherst earlier this year taking pictures of the community center there, the Banks Community Center. And there's a college in this town in Vermont. And The Aliens took place behind a coffee shop that was more or less modeled on a coffee shop in Amherst. One of the wonderful things for us is that Annie's mother still lives in Amherst. And though Annie is, as you said, a very big deal playwright, she's won MacArthur Award. She's, a Pulitzer Prize finalist or winner. I'm not remembering which, apologies. But one of the great things is that when we did The Aliens, it was great for Annie's mother because she could bring her friends to see Annie's play, right? It had gotten all these big productions all over the world, including in New York, but this was the first time it was close enough that she could just bring her friends to show what her daughter does. I don't know if it was the first time, but at least it was an opportunity for that. And Annie and I have communicated some. She was actually in the area last summer shooting a film, doing her first film in and around the Amherst area. The production company A24, which makes really wonderful independent films, was working with her, and she was had written and was up directing that film last summer.
Have you done any directing in places other than Chester since you left to go to Smith?
It has been a long time since I've directed much of anywhere else. Spring of last year, I directed at Bridge Street Theater in Catskill, New York. And I've directed with my students at Smith. But this is really, since I've fully departed from running Chester Theater Company, this is my first sort of full-on guest director role. And it's exciting. It's exciting to go into.
Has it been a big transition for you leaving producing theater and going into the academic theater world?
It has. So as you know, I was doing some teaching before, but I stepped back into chairing at Smith at a particularly exciting moment for us there. We had just hired a new faculty member in acting. This year, I've just hired a new faculty member in playwriting. We're trying to really reinvent that curriculum. I was just honored at Smith with an endowed professorship. And it's been valuable to kind of say, you can't focus on everything all the time, right? And so I really had to say what I owe my students, and that department is a certain kind of focus. And frankly, what I owe Chester is the chance for folks like James and Tara who can make it their first focus and really, give it the love and take it the directions they feel it needs to go.
It seems that they're taking it in a new direction, but they're honoring the past and the foundation that you built and that had been built prior to the time that you were there. So have you been to any of the productions this season, or have you been out on the West Coast?
No, I got to the first production, so I got to see the really funny, lovely production of a play called The Making of a Great Moment, which was about two itinerant theater makers traveling around on bikes, putting on a 4-hour play that is very entertaining to see a few minutes of, and that you would never want to see the full 4 hours of. And the playwright is smart enough to just give you the snippets. I haven't yet seen the play that they've just opened this past week, Guards at the Taj, which is a gorgeous script. And I know I've met the director, and I know one of the actors because he was in our production of Disgraced a number of years ago, Abuzar Farouk. And so I'm very excited to see that soon when I'm actually coming back not long from now, and I'll get a chance to see that. But it's been a delight to sort of see where they want to take it. And as you said, I think there's a beautiful continuity too. I think that was true when I came into the role. I had been associate artistic director under Byam Stevens, who ran the theater, believe it or not, for 18 years. And, you know, Tara and I worked closely together. And of course, James has been an actor on that stage many, many times. And he and I have worked together on a number of productions there. I think we did at least 3 plays together during the time I was there. And so it's really lovely, as you say, to see that they are both continuing. They know what the theater is and they're continuing it. But as I would hope, they also are finding where it needs to go next and where they need to take it.
What are some of the plays that you'll be doing at Smith as you share that?
So this fall, I'm actually directing a really crazy, marvelous play at Smith called Dance Nation by a playwright named Claire Barron. And it is a play about 11 to 13-year-old competitive dancers. And when it was done in New York, it was done with a cast where the performers ranged from probably about 20 to 70, all playing these young girls. And it's a really just remarkable play, funny and moving and just really pretty crazy. So working on that right now in terms of being in design and preparation for that show. So as soon as the semester starts, we'll be doing auditions at Smith and casting that play. And that goes up around the end of October. And that's the only play I'll be directing there, but we've, you know, put together a really, I think, pretty exciting season there. In the winter, we're doing an amazing comedy called You on the Moors Now, which sort of imagines any character you've ever known of from a sort of romantic novel, you know, a certain kind of period romantic novel, all living in one comic world together. And then finishing in the spring with a play called Everybody, which is a sort of contemporary reinterpretation of the medieval play Everyman by a wonderful contemporary playwright named Brandon Jacobs Jenkins. So a lot going on there. But it's also been a treat this summer to sort of, you know, James and Tara have my number. If they've got a question, they give me a buzz. But most of the time, my job is to stay out of the way, show up, see the plays, and applaud what they're doing.
And also work on your other stuff. I mean, doing something at Smith with a different audience and with a different mission has got to be a nice and refreshing change for you after all the years at Chester.
It is nice, and it's nice to be able to give that my focus more and to really be there with the students. You know, our students at Smith are so exciting, and that's really fun. We actually at Smith, we have a new president who's just begun, who I actually went to college with, so that was a sort of funny coincidence. So excited to sort of see what's happening there. You know, and for myself, Mark, this is an opportunity not only to focus on Smith more, but also to get back to work I had been doing before I was running Chester, because between Chester and everything else, there was really no space, but to go back to writing adaptations like my Pride and Prejudice, to go back to doing a little bit of independent filmmaking myself, which I was doing prior. You know, there's a lot to give away in terms of, you know, the joys of putting together a season at Chester, of working with all of those artists, but also a chance to work a little bit more as an individual artist working on things for myself.
And in being in the Valley here, you are exposed to so many different artistic types, whether it's theater or film. It's really a great place to be a creative.
I think it is. You know, I think we're very lucky, those of us who live in the Valley, and we have access to the cities, but there's so many folks who've chosen to live here and do their work from here. And I think that those of us who are artists and makers are really fortunate. But I think for all of us as a community, also as folks who get to go participate in and see that work that they do, visual artists, musicians, theater makers, dancers. It's a really exciting thing, and I love being a part of it. Chester is a really interesting beast itself as a theater company because in some ways it's part of that Berkshire's theater ecosystem. But of course, it's actually right here in the Pioneer Valley, right? It's actually part of Chester is in Hampden County. And so it's sort of got a foot in both worlds. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize that. I mean, it's 20 minutes from Westfield. It's not all the way in the Berkshires, but when I went to that Berkshire Theater Critics Awards, the Berkeys, to see Chester and the people there recognized alongside Barrington Stage and Berkshire Theater with no distinguishing difference. Chester holds its own with all these other bigger theaters that have major facilities and all that. And you guys operated out of a town hall that was a town hall by day and a theater after 5.
That's right.
It's kind of a triumph.
Yeah, it's a pretty terrific place. And I think, as you said, the folks who came before me, Vincent Dowling, who founded it, Byam Stevens, who ran it all those years, and I hope that during my time there, we kept moving forward. The New Yorker article I mentioned talked a lot about the idea that we're so much smaller than all of these other theaters, but also said, Chester Theater Company absolutely produces some of the most interesting work in the area. The article was called The Little Theater That Might. And I hope we've even become the little theater that does. And I think it's really a treat for me to see what James Barry and Tara Franklin are up to. And I should also say I'm so thrilled that they asked me to come back and be a part of it. I would have completely understood if they said, Daniel's great, but we need a little space and we need it to be our own thing without him. And I'm honored that they would want me back there, and thrilled to get to work with Tara as an actor again. She's so terrific. It was 2 years ago was the most recent time she and I got to work together when we did Tiny Beautiful Things while Chester was in residence out at Hancock Shaker Village. And so it's a remarkable place. It's an amazing theater in an unlikely place doing really beautiful work.
And I think I've seen some of the most exciting theater that I've ever seen at Chester, and it's large theater done on a small scale. I'm always astounded when I go there that there might be 100 people maximum in the theater, and it's like the actors are 2 rows away. Everything is so intimate, and yet these stories that I've seen there are larger than life on so many levels.
Well, I think that the theater has for a long time had a focus and said, look, there are 3 things that matter. One is you have to have a terrific play, right? Don't bother if you don't just have a wonderful play. 2 is you have to have terrific actors, right? One of the great things, if you do plays that only have 2 to 5 people, you can make sure that every role has a wonderful actor in it. And then third, as a result of that, you get these great audiences and these great conversations, right? And that, look, they do lovely sets. You can go, they'll take nice care of you. Everybody's friendly and welcoming. But really, when it comes down to it, you have terrific plays, terrific actors. And as you said, you're right there with them, right? You feel like you're sharing the space with them. They're not off in some other world. You're all together in that space.
One of the plays they did recently was your adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, which has been done in other theaters. What's it like to see your play done in a theater other than Chester?
Yeah, it's fun, actually. One of the great things for me about doing the writing, which I came to a little later in my career, is exactly that, is seeing other folks do productions of it. And, I guess there are a lot of ways you could feel about it, right? You could feel protective of it. You could say, oh, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. But for me, it's really a treat to see other folks playing with it and discovering things in it that I might not have thought of. Just this spring, there were a couple of productions of Pride and Prejudice. One was done at a small professional theater in Long Island that did a production of it that folks apparently really liked. And then there was a community theater in Maryland that did a production of it and then brought it to some regional community theater competition and then won that. And they were just last month in Louisville doing Pride and Prejudice at the National Conference of Community Theaters. And one of the actors won for Best Lead Actor at this national convention. And it's, you know, to think that you're making work that people can do that kind of exploring with and kind of find their own joy and energy from. It's great. It's a wonderful feeling.
When when you direct, do you and the playwright is living, do you ever have the chance to talk to the playwright as you're getting into the directing phase to bounce ideas? And when people are doing your work, can they call you and bounce their ideas off of you as they're going into production?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the second of those. I love when people do, though. I have no problem if they don't, but a couple of times people have reached out to let me know what was going on, or to ask a question about it. And it's always a treat, you know, and my answer is usually, you know, I'll tell you what I can, but also do what works, right? Do what works for you all. I know as a director, I've certainly gotten to do that some. You know, obviously I've worked some on new plays that we're just developing, but also on plays that maybe it wasn't the first production, but we've gotten to chat with people. Also as an artistic director, you know, at Chester, 2 years ago when we came back and opened under the tent at Hancock Shaker Village, the first play we did was a play by a playwright named Will Eno. And he actually came up and wrote a couple of new lines for us since we were out under a tent surrounded by farm and cows and things. And he said, let me come play with that and see what we can do. So yeah, it's always a treat to get to do that. You know, I'll actually be in touch a little bit with Claire Barron about the play that I'm doing this fall. And actually hoping she might come up and visit with our Smith students as well. But these are really great opportunities because we work so often on contemporary plays to be in, you know, to sort of be in dialogue with those playwrights and to learn from them what they were thinking about.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you even want to say, hey, what if you anything you want to let us know that, you know, are traps folks have fallen into or things that you've discovered that are really cool that we should give a look at?
Yeah. Teaching and running the program at Smith is different than the theater school that we went to, where we were trained. It was the assumption that when we got into Yale drama school that we would go into the business. You were trained for it. And in my case, I was disappointed them because I was more interested in opera and musical theater than the type of theater that Yale was doing. But nonetheless, I got this foundation, and it was expected that all of us would go into the biz. What happens with the kids at Smith? Are they taking theater for an appreciation of it, working because they want to learn more about it, or do they have the hope that they'll go into the business?
Well, I mean, part of what's fun at a place like Smith is the real answer to that question is every one of those, right? That I have students who are in each of those places. So there absolutely are students who are there and they want to major in theater and it's the work that they want to do. I mean, I was just talking about Hero, who is the Smith graduate who's about to come do her first professional production with us. So there's absolutely that. But also, if you sort of think about a liberal arts college, right? Not everybody in a geology class plans to be a geologist. Not everybody in a philosophy class plans to be a philosopher. Right? And so it's also part of an education that says one of the cool things about theater is that it has this particular way you can ask questions about the world around you. Right. And it has the experience of really immersing yourself in the work of an acting class or a design class or a writing class or a directing class is, I think, super valuable for both that college student who may be thinking that's what I'm going to go do, but also for somebody who has some whole other plan for their lives. Right. But those experiences, that idea that one of the ways you learn about the world is by imagining these lives outside of your own, right? And trying to inhabit them and telling stories about these characters. I think that has an awful lot of value for all of us.
How did you come to teaching? I mean, did you think that you would be teaching when you were at Yale, or did it come to you later on?
Well, as you point out, right, for those of us who went to the drama school, it's very much a professionally oriented place, right? And it's a training program, and they're assuming that our goal is to go out and do this work. And I moved down to New York after I'd finished at Yale, moved back to New York where I just got married that summer. My wife was already living in the city as well. and sort of floated around for a little while. And frankly, I kind of stumbled my way into it because I got a call from the guy who's no longer with us, but a wonderful director who ran the theater program at Fordham at Lincoln Center, saying, hey, this was in like August or something. The guy who teaches directing for us just took a job somewhere else. Somebody gave me your name. Would you be free to come in for an interview about a job that starts in 3 weeks teaching at Fordham? And that honestly ended up becoming my first college teaching job. And so it just kind of, from there, I've sort of done a little of each, or maybe a lot of each along the way, but it was very much a kind of stumbled into situation. But I did that and had a great time doing it and thought, oh, look at that. Of course, there are also these additional nice things. Turns out that you get a lot better health insurance and things like that teaching at a college than you do being a freelance director.
That's true. And do you, and a lot of administrative responsibilities that directors don't have. Do you actually? I mean, you get to direct a production or two at Smith over the course of the year. What classes do you teach?
So it varies, but this coming year I'll be teaching. I'll be teaching a class I've not taught in a bunch of years, which is that I'll be teaching a beginning acting class. And I have not done that in a little while. It's been interesting this summer thinking about what do I want to do differently than I've done with that class in the past, right? What do I want to do there? And what do I think, the very question you were asking, why are students in a theater class at Smith, right? I've been trying to think about how do I make an experience that works for all of those kinds of students, right? Right. That for the student who's really serious about this as a pathway, how am I making sure that they're getting the experience they need? For a student who this may be the one theater class they ever take, how do I make sure that it's also a class that works for them? So I'm doing that. And then in spring, every year, pretty much, I teach a directing class. And that's kind of, in a lot of ways, that's home base for me, right? Because that's teaching the thing that's my own central work.
That you do mostly, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll be directing the production in the fall. I'll teach this Acting 1 course in the fall. In the spring, I'll direct a production. And then I do a lot of advising students. And then a lot of the other work of the sort of curriculum building that we're trying to do in that program right now.
Has Smith generated, other than this actor hero Marguerite that you just mentioned, who's making their professional debut at Chester, have any other graduates of Smith, since you've been there, gone on to have a career in theater or film?
Oh gosh, lots of them, absolutely. I was mentioning that earlier this summer. I was at a film festival. It was the Provincetown Film Festival, which, by the way, is a wonderful way to spend a week in June. Saw a whole bunch of films, one of which was production designed by a Smith graduate named Claire DeLiso, who actually studied at Yale as well after Smith. And that was really cool to see that. A wonderful director named M. Weinstein, who's out doing work right now. Bunch of folks, Emily Brown, who went on to get her master's at ACT in San Francisco, who's an actor and a musician. A lot. I mean, I'm only starting. There's a wonderful sound designer who graduated a few years back, got her MFA, who we're hoping to bring up to do some work with us. It's absolutely been the case that a lot of folks have come out of Smith and gone on to do that work. That's been true for years historically, but also just in more recent time. So a whole bunch of folks do, but you also will find your graduates who will say, oh, I'm going into the Foreign Service, and they were a theater major and they're thrilled that they were a theater major, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I know that you adapt plays and write plays when you're not doing all this other stuff. How many plays are you working on at the moment?
I'm actually in this funny place, Mark, where I'm trying to figure out for sure what the next adaptation writing project is. It might be Frankenstein. I'm working with a company in Ohio on this possibility of developing a new adaptation of Frankenstein. And the thought is that it is obviously the telling of that amazing book itself, but in some ways also the story of Mary Shelley the very young at the time she wrote it author of Frankenstein. But we're also exploring a little bit where does artificial intelligence and the experiences we're just starting to have in that exploration, where might that fit in? And what are the parallels between that and that story of Frankenstein? And I know that the folks who work in artificial intelligence think a whole lot about that. And Frankenstein is one of the kind of touchstones for them. So I'm trying to do a little exploring there and see whether that might take me someplace.
Well, Daniel, you sound like you're really happy in this new world of yours, and I hope that people will get to see Circle Mirror Transformation at Chester Theater, which is the final production of their season. You can get tickets at chestertheater.org or go on to Facebook and check out Chester Theater. They're very active on social media. And Daniel, it's great to see you today.
Mark, it's great to see you too. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
We'll have to chat again in the fall when you're up and running with your new academic season.
I'd love to. That sounds great.
And this wraps up another edition of Artsbeat TV and Radio. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach, and we'll see you with an all-new Artsbeat next week.
Thank you.